Someone is using an administrator override from the CEO's office. They're running a defrag and wipe command. It's a digital scorched earth policy. Can you trace the origin? I asked, pulling out my phone to record the screen. I don't need to trace it. Look! He pointed to a secondary monitor. A live security feed showed the CEO, Dr. Arthur Vance, standing over his desk. He wasn't typing. He was watching a progress bar on a tablet. Next to him stood the hospital's legal counsel. They weren't just deleting files, they were scrubbing the ghost logs, the hidden data that proved how often those call buttons had been silenced across the entire facility over the last 3 years. If that bar hits 100%, Miller said, his voice trembling, every signal divert ever recorded becomes system maintenance. It turns a crime into a technicality. I realized then that this wasn't just about saving a nurse's reputation. This was about a multi-million-dollar wrongful death lawsuit that would bankrupt the hospital. They had calculated the cost of a human life and decided it was cheaper to bury the evidence than to hire more staff. "Miller," I said, grabbing his shoulder, "is there any way to intercept the data before it's wiped?" "Only if we physically pull the hard drives from the Array 7 rack," he said, pointing to a towering black cabinet at the back of the room. "But the moment I pull them, the alarm will trigger. Security will be here in seconds." "Do it," I ordered. "I'll handle security." As Miller scrambled toward the rack with a screwdriver, the office door behind me slammed open. It wasn't the police, it was the hospital's private security detail, and they weren't carrying clipboards. The physical struggle in the server room was just the beginning. While security tried to force their way in, Miller managed to mirror the drive to a secure external cloud. By the time the administration realized they had failed to wipe the ghost logs, it was too late. The data was out. The headline hit the Morning Chronicle 2 days later. The Silent Ward, how Cedarcrest muted the dying. The legal battle that followed was unlike anything the city had ever seen. The courtroom was packed every day, not just with journalists, but with families. Dozens of families who had lost loved ones at Cedarcrest and had always felt in the back of their minds that something wasn't right. They remembered the way their mothers or fathers had been found, clutching at sheets, eyes wide, their bodies twisted in a final failed attempt to reach for help. Dr. Arthur Vance, the CEO, sat at the defense table in a $3,000 suit. His lawyers didn't argue that the signal diverts didn't happen. They couldn't. The logs were undeniable. Instead, they argued necessity. "The healthcare system is at a breaking point," his lead attorney shouted during opening statements. "My client had to make impossible choices. By managing the alarm fatigue of his staff, he was ensuring that the most critical emergencies received the most attention. It was a triage of sound." But then, I was called to the stand. I didn't talk about triage. I talked about the physics of the room. I showed the jury the photo of Arthur Vance's hand. I explained how the signal divert didn't just cut a buzzer, it cut the only thread connecting a terrified human being to the rest of the world. The turning point came when we played the audio metadata. Miller had discovered that while the call button signals were diverted, the system's internal microphones, installed for patient monitoring, had still been recording. We played the audio from room 412. The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear the clicking of the call button. It sounded like a telegraph in a disaster movie. It went on for 45 minutes. Then, a faint, raspy voice. Arthur Vance's last words. "Is anyone there? Please, I can't breathe." At the nurse's station, less than 20 feet away, the logs showed the staff were laughing over a birthday cake. They never heard him. Not because they weren't listening, but because the software had been told to ignore him. The jury didn't even need 4 hours to deliberate. Cedarcrest Wellness Center didn't just lose the lawsuit, it was dismantled. The $150 million settlement was the largest in state history, but the money didn't matter to the families. What mattered was the Arthur Vance law, which now mandates that any hospital found using Signal Divert software faces immediate criminal charges for the board of directors. Marcus Thorne, the nurse, received 10 years for involuntary manslaughter. Dr. Vane received 15 for conspiracy and evidence tampering. I still drive past the old Cedarcrest building sometimes. It's empty now, the windows boarded up, the St. Jude statues covered in ivy. People say the building is haunted, that if you stand outside on a quiet night, you can hear a faint rhythmic clicking sound coming from the upper floors. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in the weight of a silence that was bought and paid for. Arthur Vance finally got his answer. Someone was listening. It just took us too long to hear him. They say that in the digital age, nothing is truly lost. Every text, every search, every like leaves a footprint. But we found out the hard way that the same technology designed to connect us can be used to erase us. The story of the patient call button that no one pressed wasn't really about a mechanical failure. It was about a failure of humanity. We built a world where efficiency became more important than empathy, and where a human life could be reduced to a line of code that was simply muted. I think about Arthur Vance every night before I go to sleep. I think about those 45 minutes he spent in the dark, clicking a plastic button and wondering if he had already ceased to exist. He did everything right. He reached out. He asked for help. He followed the rules of a system that promised to protect him. But the system didn't just fail him, it decided he was a nuisance.